In this lesson, we're going to continue sit and down and add some more behaviors. Some of you will have blasted through the first two steps of sitting down without much issue, but some of you will have gotten stuck. And that's particular to sit and down at this stage of the game. Specifically, some of you will have been unable to prompt your dog into position, and some of your dogs will have gone belly up once the food was out of your hand. So let's go over standard splits, intermediate steps, for these two fairly common issues. Sitting down Plan B are for dogs who are not readily prompted. Dogs who often need Plan B include dogs with greyhoundy builds, for whom sit is awkward, and some small dogs who can readily target a down prompt with minimal crouching. This is why I'll be using little 5-pound Nico for this demonstration. He's exactly the type that can struggle here. Let's have a look. You'll notice when I go to lure Nico into a sit, he's very inclined to rear up on his hind legs. And this is the type of dog, small, and he's a little bit worried about the lure, that often needs our Plan B. That's where we gradually shape the dog to sit rather than just prompting it outright like I did with Lulu. So let's look at this process. My first step is to see, can I get him to just raise his head without his front feet coming off the ground? There it is. I'll show you again, that's a 1 for 1. So I'm looking for just head up without front feet off the ground. There we go. 2 for 2. And he can take his time. He's a little bit, he's worried about the studio, he's worried about the camera. There's all kinds of stuff in here that makes it tricky. He's also a small dog. And just for whatever reason, small dogs often need Plan B. There's a good boy. It's easier for them, for whatever reason, to target without sitting when their heads go up. So we need to do it a little bit more gradually. That was a 2 for 3 because that time he reared. There we go. 3 for 4. So my current criteria is, oops, there's a 3 for 5. So that's a stick. There we go. I'm just looking for his head to just do that little tip up without the front feet coming off the ground. 1 for 1, 2 for 2. That one leg I don't care about. 3 for 3. 4 for 4. 5 for 5. Okay, now I'm going to see if he can do this same thing, but hold it for 2 seconds. 1001, 1002. There we go. So I'm not worried about his hind end just yet. All I care is, will he crank his head 2 seconds without his front feet rearing up? 1, whoops, 1, 2. That one was, he got scared, so I'm not going to count that. So that's a 3 for 3. 1001, whoops, oh, there's a 3 for 4, 1001, 1002, there we go. Okay, that's a 4 for 5. It's a tenuous push, but I've got a push. So now I'm going to see if he can do it for 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. Oh, that was a judgment call. I gave it to him, but the little feet did come up. 1, 2, 3. That was a beautiful one. Whoops. And that was the world's worst position feed. 1, 2, 3. I do want to position feed high. It's all good for the cause. Whoops. 2 for 3. 1, 2, 3. Is it? Whoops. 3 for 4. Another terrible position feed. Let's see if we get it. 1, 2. Whoops. Too bad. Whoops. So I'm on a stick again. There's a stick, and that's an 0 for 1 on my stick set. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, he's worried about stuff going on over there. 2, 3. Good boy. 1, 2, 3. Good boy. So I'm going to let him, I'm not going to consider it a dud trial if he gets spooked by something. Only if his front feet off the ground. That's going to be an 0 for if he does that. Whoops, like that. One of the things that was slowing Nico down after I experimented right after our first demo, it turns out that the substrate, this floor, although it is for dogs and it's got good traction, etc., it was just a little bit difficult for Nico to want to sit. And so after the experiments, I'm now going to use his little pad, which he's very comfortable lying down on. It's where he's done all his sleeping. And I'm going to see if I can see if my nice knee bends and wrist buckles that I was getting in my last demo are paying off. And lo and behold, he's already quite readily. There we go. Sitting. So one of the things, if you've got a dog that's got a short coat, Whippet, Greyhound, these little dogs, substrate can really matter. Now, if this is something that's quite cushy, you can experiment with something that is just basically a carpet in your home or a rug. You can use the dog's bed if this is not cushy enough. And then once that is looking fluid, so now he's going for a lure. I'm on a 4 for 4, which is great. There we go. You can then say, okay, can I lure you on the surface that was more difficult? And he's saying, yes, now I can do that. So the split, we had an extra split. We had all those nice knee bend splits and rocking back splits, but we also inserted another one, which was substrate. So let me see, I'm 1 for 1 on full lure on the more difficult substrate. There's a 2 for 2, 3 for 3. Up. There's a 4 for 4 and a 5 for 5. So I'm going to first of all see if I can lure down on his, get my sit. I'm going to pay my setup sit because it's still a very fledgling behavior. And there he goes, and very nice down. Now we did get an opportunity when we were rehearsing or we were trying out different substrates. I practiced a little bit, and sure enough, he's smart as a whip. He learned with minimal splits. The splits for down would be, first of all, to get him to target a lure at all, holding his sit, which he was able to do. And then you would shop for crouching or wrist bends. The dog's wrist is that final joint. So there's their little foot and there's the joint that goes that way. And sometimes one of the early signs that the dog is thinking about going down will be that wrist will start to bend. Okay, that's sometimes a tell. The other one is you can just basically look for increased crouching, okay, or they're moving forward. See, in Nico's case, he both bends his wrists and he does his little bit of forward movement. And those would be the splits that you'd be shopping for in your Plan B dog. Okay, there he goes. Good. Okay, so I'm going to call that a 5 for 5, even though I was demoing some splits, because he actually did it. And I'm going to see if I can get him to do it on this more difficult substrate, which is actually going to be a little bit harder on his elbows. It is sort of soft. It's got cushioning, but it's not nearly as soft as that. And may as well practice sit from a down while I'm at it. Down, boy, he is going quite readily. And that's the beauty of splits. Very nice. So if he does well at this, I'm going to go ahead and do Plan C. And because he had a difficulty, he needed Plan B and he needed the extra little split of the substrate, I'm going to do Plan C where I divorce him from the lure, both on and off the soft, fleecy. And whoops, oh, one for the dog, trainer error. Very good boy. I'm going to pay that sit because once again, that's still pretty new. There we go. The other thing with Nico is he was a little bit worried the first few times he was in the studio. There's actually a camera that moves. There's a man in here. It's pretty exciting stuff, and he was actually a little bit worried. And now that he's been in a few times and hasn't died, he's actually habituated to some of these stimuli, and that's also helping my cause, making him a little bit more willing to focus and work on the treats. If you remember in Lecture 1, one of the core principles of training is the dog has to feel safe. Otherwise, our crummy little games for crummy little prizes matter not. And now he is feeling safe. So I've got this great situation where not only can I proceed with my sits and downs, but he's cataloged this thing that he thought was dangerous, and it actually turned out to be not only safe, but a cookie place, which is fantastic for his emotional well-being. Okay, so I'm going to call it a 5 for 5. I'm going to show him it's an empty hand, and I'm going to get him in a stand because I'm going to do first of all, my good, got one, I'm paying from my signal hand, got one luckily there. We're on Plan C now, which is, actually I'm going to do this properly. I'm burying the lure in my palm like that, where he can sort of smell it, but it's not as literal as when I was doing it like this. And I'm going to see if he'll sit on his fleecy, and he did. Okay, there's a 1 for 1. And again, burying it, get him up. He's definitely sniffing, so he's a tiny bit literal, 2 for 2, but he went very happily. Buried. There we go. Pay that. Buried in my palm. So my hand kind of looks more natural. It's more of a simulation of my eventual signal, and I can pay in position really rapidly when he does go. There we go. Oh, you're such a good boy. He's the cutest little thing. And then I'm going to do my other split. The other great split for literal dogs who have a hard time performing without a food lure, is you do the same thing. You bury the lure so your hand looks more natural like a signal. But this time when he goes, I pay from my other hand. So he's learning that although there's a lure in here, treats can come from just about anywhere. And that helps to divorce him a little bit from this visible lure. Well, it's actually not visible, it's smellable. I'm gonna get him up. He's very comfy on his bed. There we go. Pay from my other hand. That can be very surprising for dogs. Sometimes if you do things like get them to spin for a toy and then feed with food, or get them to spin for a treat and then pay with a toy, at first their heads explode a little bit. But it's actually kind of a neat practice to do. You end up with dogs who are much more ready to perform under slightly odd conditions. It's all good. So far I'm a 4 for 4 for my good boy. Okay. He's actually even starting to bias. When I signaled my sit, he looked towards my other hand, and that's what position feeding does. And sometimes, for this one, it's just that I want to divorce him, but in other cases, you're actually strategically feeding so that the dog goes away. So for instance, in Leave It, we like to pay from our person, not from the thing on the ground, because then you can end up with these wonderful superstitions and these wonderful anticipatory responses where dogs, they see a piece of garbage and their head snaps towards the handler. Or if there's another dog and another dog barks at them, their heads snap towards the handler. And that's all because of position feeding. Nico's saying, you know what, this is getting dull. Let me get back to work. There we go, and I've got a 5 for 5. So I'm going to go without a net now. And I'm going to see if I can do a plain old empty hand. So now he's streamed right back into plan A. I've got an empty hand. I'm showing him. I'm not trying to fake him out. Good boy. And he did it. Another one. He's rocking back without, also I'm seeing not great hints of literalism. He's not sort of checking out my hand. He's just doing it, as we say, on faith. He's saying, oh, yeah, that's the behavior that works. I can do that for you. Get him up. He's saying, do I have to get up? Because I'd really rather sit, because that's what's paying off. There's a 4 for 4 and a nice 5 for 5. Okay. Let me see what I'm going to get for down. And then, if that goes well, I'm going to try on the blue mat and see if I can get a pro dog here. And my sit from down is newer, so I'm going to go ahead and lure that. So this is empty hand. Oh, I've got a hesitation, so let me go ahead and do a little bit of plan C with him. Buried in my palm, down, other hand. See if that split is good enough. Waiting, there we go. Feed from this hand. I'm going to lure my sit to get him back in position. Store that for later. Buried in my hand. Oh, what a good boy. That one, if you could notice, that one was a little bit less literal. He kind of almost went on the motion. There was no sort of hesitation of, well, this can't possibly work. He just went, almost kind of reflexively, although that's not exactly what's going on. That's what it can feel like from the trainer's point of view. Good. That one was a little bit more literal. Lure my sit. There we go. And let's see if I can get one more. And then I'm going to try the blue mat. Buried in my hand, straight down. Pay from the other hand. That time, he scoped my other hand. This is a smart little kid. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and try my down from a sit. Buried lure on the blue mat. Whoops, he's saying, that's a little tougher. I'm going to pay my sit, buried in my hand, straight down, and he's saying, no, well, that's an 0 for 1. Straight down, got a 1 for 2. That was lucky. Lure my sit, buried in my hand, whoops, straight down. Oh, what a good boy. He went. He was definitely checking the lure, but he did go, and I'll take it. Oh, he did his sit by himself. I'm going to pay that. Why not? That one, although my lure hand was close to him, he went with 0 latency. So that's a really nice harbinger of good things to come. Buried in my hand, straight down, wait. I've got a latency. He's thinking. I've never seen that signal in my life. So that was a 3 for 5. I'm going to go ahead and stick. Buried in my hand, straight down. This is my stick set. He's looking a little bit literal, but he went. Also style points because he went kind of in a nice little crushing movement. There we go. That one was faster latency, but still he was very about the lure. He's looking at my left hand, and I'm going to put it behind my back because that was actually not helping. It was confusing him a bit. So down and then pay. Very alert, these little guys. He hears a sound and he's definitely wanting to check it out. So let me see if I can stream him into plan A for down on the blue mat. Oh, champion. Champion dog. Get my sit. This dog could not be cuter. He's professionally engineered for cuteness. Dogs are one of mankind's greatest invention, if not the greatest invention. Oh, I got a free sit. I'm going to pay it, capture it. Empty hand, straight down, blown trial. Oh boy, too bad. That's an a 1 for 2, sorry. He's saying, I think I'll go on my mat. This is a bit, but it's okay. I'm on a 1 for 2, so I'm not going to go on the topography. The topography means he's looking a little bit, he's not afraid, he's just confused. So I'm going to just stick with my 1 for 2 and see how my set plays out. Got a nice little sit. Empty hand, straight down. Whoops. Got a latency issue here. He's still sitting, so I'm going to go ahead and just wait. And he's saying, I'm going to go to my mat. So there's a 1 for 3. Thank you for that sit. That was delicious. He's checking out the new treat. He's going to go examine it, and that's really normal. Sometimes even if something is better, they have to go away and think about it. Good boy. Nice sit. Whoop. Thank you. So I'm on a 1 for 3. Empty hand. Waiting for it, waiting for it. Actually, I should have my hand behind my back. How about that? A 2 for 4. Who's a champ? Wasn't expecting that. Good boy. And I got a 3 for 5. Fantastic. So I'm going to go ahead and quit there because technically now he's on plan A and he's on plan A on the mat. So I can proceed with him as I would with Lulu. Good boy. Our next behavior with Lulu is sit from a down, and that is going to be done the usual way, where a prompt right on her nose, up to where she would be in a sit, and then pay in position. For her setup down, because we've already taught that to the point of a hand signal, I'm going to go ahead and just practice at her level, which is hand signal. There we go. Hand signal, boom, pay that. Full lure on her nose, up to a sit, and pay in position. I'm at 3 for 3. A little reload. Hand signal down, pay that. Lure right on her nose, up she goes, 4 for 4. For dogs, even though we're eventually going to call this sit, it's not quite the same thing as sit from a stand. If you think about it, sit from a stand is a motor pattern of the dog rocking back, doing that. Sit from a down, they're actually pushing themselves up. So unlike us, who can conceptualize the destination of sit being something that you do regardless of where you were previously, for dogs, it's the actual muscle movements that they're learning. Luckily, though, we can eventually call them both sit, because dogs are very good at specific case. And she can learn when I'm already in a down and I hear sit, that's the one where I push up. Okay, our next behavior now is stationing. And stationing means to hold position while something else is being done. And in this case, we're going to be later on teaching her some husbandry behaviors, things like having her teeth brushed, being groomed, having her mouth and ears examined. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try for a muzzle hold station. What that means is that I want her to be in the position where I'm holding on gently to her muzzle. That's my first step. This can be contentious for some dogs though, because that's sort of a loaded thing, is to grab a dog. So we do have a punt. If it turns out that your dog finds that too scary, we can do a chin rest instead. But if possible, let's do the muzzle hold, because that's going to set us up a little bit better for later on. So first thing I'm going to do is see if Lulu will tolerate this. Hand over her muzzle and then immediately I feed. So mind my order of events. Hand, and then pay. I'm not squeezing, I'm just touching her like that with my hand that way. It doesn't matter if the dog's in a sit or down, I'm positioning her in a sit just for the convenience of the camera. What a good girl. 2 for 2, and she's tolerating it. So the criteria for her basically is, does she let me do it? Okay, so if your dog withdraws, that's your cue to try the chin rest instead. But let me do a few more with Lulu, and we're going to do sets of 10 with this. The reason we're doing sets of 10 is because of the contentiousness. I really want to make sure it's very fluent before I push to something harder. And it also gives me a better sample and gives her more of a conditioned response. On the other side of the ledger, where she's learning about training and whether training is fun, safe, or okay, she's also learning that not only holding the stay pace, but she's going to actually like having her muzzle grabbed. So my ultimate goal is not tolerance. My ultimate goal is that she actually enjoys and participates in her veterinary care and husbandry. So muzzle and then food. Okay. Make sure that you do your part of the, or she does her part of the bargain first, which is tolerate the muzzle and then I feed. Okay. That's good. So now she's done that really well. So I'm going to show you the chin rest. If your dog happens to be afraid, you're going to do something different, and that is under the chin and then pay this way. Okay, so ultimately your station will be the dog resting like that. I'll show you one more time. Under the chin, she's looking for a treat, and then pay. And that's okay. When they make those kinds of errors, it doesn't matter. Just carry on. Our next behavior is watch. Watch means to make and maintain eye contact. And this is something that's really good on walks if your dog tends to sort of see something and want to lunge or go after it, or just if you want your dog to attend to you. And as usual, we're going to start with a prompt. So my first step is basically from her nose to my eyes, and then I pay. Very simple. Boom, up, pay. 1 second. 1001. As soon as I see her eyes make contact with my eyes, that's the criteria has been made and she gets paid. Boom, pay. So the first step is really a gimme. Almost any dog will do this. Boom, good. My next step is, will she do it without the food prompt, just for a finger? So the hand signal is going to be me pointing at my eyes. Good girl. And as soon as she does, I mark it. Good girl, very good. Good girl, yeah. And then I pay. And the position pay for this is just pay a little bit high. Don't pay down there, okay? And it doesn't matter, she's in a down position, that's fine. She can make eye contact in any position she likes. And I think I'm gonna go ahead and do one more. I think that was a 5 for 5, but what a good girl. And then we pay. Now my next step, this is the tough one. I'm going to do a Premack watch, and that means I'm giving her a choice between the food hand and the eye contact hand, and she's going to guess wrong. And I'm going to tell you in the meantime, while we're, oh, good girl! That was miraculous. Oh, the food is there. Good girl! Now I promise you this was not pre-trained. Good girl, yes. So David Premack was a psychologist who is known for many things, including the first to talk about theory of mind. But Animal trainers know him, and we've actually verbed his name and turned it into an adjective. We talk about things being pre-macky. We talk about pre-macking behavior. And what he did was he reframed the concept of positive reinforcement from being a thing, so food, to an activity, eating, a behavior. And what Premack's principle states is that any high probability behavior, so eating is a high probability behavior, if Lulu is allowed to free behave right now, what she would most probably do is eat. And that's empirical. We can test it out. What does she do if she's given a choice? We can use any high probability behavior to boost a lower probability behavior in frequency. And so, as one of my students once pointed out, it's all Premack. All reinforcement can be thought of that way, that anything we do, if the dog sits or downs and we then pay, sitting or downing is lower probability than eating. And so it really is all Premack. But we don't actually invoke his name until we're doing something with that weird physics component, that piece where it's likely to be counterintuitive for the dog, and where Premack's principle is thrown into really sharp relief. And so, for example, the Premack watch, which is the low probability behavior, is looking away from that food. The high probability behavior is eating. And I can boost looking away from the food towards my eyes. And I'm going to, oh, good girl, prompted her with my voice, which is legal at my first Premack step, by simply reinforcing it when she looks away. And so this, for dogs, is very, very, very counterintuitive. Her whole life up until now has taught her that the way you get stuff is to move towards them, to just take things. To actually turn away from something to get it is just very weird physics. Get her a little bit closer. So hold to the side, and you're allowed to prompt with your voice. Oh, good girl! And as soon as she looks away and makes eye contact, you pay. And I'm going to pay like this. Okay, that's my position feed. So I'm going to, oh, good girl! What a good girl. Now, she's extremely good at this. Lulu is just pretty much a virtuoso. Oh, good girl. She's doing it really well. If your dog takes longer, don't worry. Just wait, okay? You've got all the cards. If you're holding the food, it doesn't matter what they do. If they try to mug you for the food, they try anything else, just wait and wait. As soon as you get that eye contact, ooh, tell them they're good and pay right away. And that's your Premack watch. Coming when called is vitally important for people. It's also very expensive behavior for most dogs. This equation means we do not nickel and dime recalls. So contrast what I'm about to do, which I'm going to do very long latencies in between with huge payoffs, with the rest of the training that I've been showing you, which is very tiny rewards for little micro pieces of behavior. The reason for this is the expensive recalls and that we're starting with a respondent conditioning model. We're going to talk more in detail later on about respondent conditioning, and that's a little bit different from just straight operant conditioning. For now, we're just going to do it. Okay? And the way this unfolds is I wait, and preferably at a time when she's least expecting it. Because I'm on camera, she is expecting a little bit because here I am armed and loaded. I'm going to make a novel sound. Lulu, Lulu! And then she gets a huge payoff. And it's a handful of stuff. These are beefy treats that she's not yet had today. And she gets an actual payoff. And that's my rep. And what I'm suggesting is that you do it once or twice a day. Okay? We will be talking in detail about this later on. For now, it's nighty time. You're just going to do what I told you to do. The exercise is the cue predicts the huge party. There is no other criteria. There's no required behavior. She doesn't have to actually do anything. That will come later. For now, all that has to happen is the cue and then the party. This is our secret sauce foundation. It's critically important to not wait for or expect behavior. Don't dilute your contingency. The contingency is the sound, Lulu, Lulu, and then the party. Notice my order of events. The sound was first, and then the huge party. When you're doing this, there are a couple of ways that you can do this that are really going to help your cause. The first one is to do what we call bait bag fashion shows. That means if you're using a bait pouch or you're putting treats in your pocket, you're going to load up your pouch load up your pockets, and then wear it around the house without dispensing any. What this does is it separates from the dog's mind the idea that the only time they get paid is when there's treats and they don't get paid when there's not treats. You're actually teaching them that no, it's not this bait pouch, it's not the smell of whatever you've got on you that makes the treats, it's that sound. The sound is the only and best predictor that they're going to have that magnificent party. There's another thing you can do that is also going to accomplish the same goal, and that's what we call bridge and fridge. Okay, so in this case, you don't have any food on you. You just a couple of times a day, you give your special sound, and then you invite the dog to the fridge. You run with him to the fridge, and you have the party there. You pull whatever you were going to give him out of the fridge. And that might be chicken, it might be cheese, but again, something big, something really generous. And in that case, you had no tip-off. Out of the blue, the dog heard the sound and then, "What's this?" And then came the party. The point of all this careful hygiene is that our goal is to have a dog who dreams of these spectacular parties, and specifically what tells him one is about to occur. Dogs have long learning histories of our prepping treats, the smell of treats, us wearing bait pouches, and so on, predicting the good stuff, because it usually does. But we don't want a dog who's going to have a stellar recall when these items are present. We want just the recall cue itself to get loaded. Note that this is one of the big exceptions to the Zenith TV motto canon. We are front-loading the cue, literally. The competing stimuli of bait prep and so on don't matter as much for sit, down, and other behaviors. But for the recall, which is so expensive for the dog, we can really help ourselves with fastidious attention to this detail. We're going to talk more about the theory behind it in a future lesson. So which is best, bridge and fridge, the bait bag fashion shows, or another strategy, caching, where you store in Tupperware containers food around the house and spring surprise parties on him there? The answer is this: variety. Do all of them. Alternate. What we want is for the one common denominator to be your recall cue. I'd like you to choose a novel recall cue, something that'll roll easily off your tongue when you're flustered and need your dog to come to you in an emergency, but one that your dog has never heard before. For many of you, this might rule out the word come. Okay, so what do you do if you've already put some irrelevancy mileage on the word come, but you still want to use it? In other words, is it mandatory to exploit novelty here? No. You can use a pre-exposed cue, but you get a nice advantage if you use a novel cue. The reason is, when you make this new sound, your dog notices, and he asks a question. That's new. What does it mean? And then you get to answer this question. It means party. And this conditioning kickstart really helps the cause. So choose your cue, and once or twice a day at a random time, give the cue, wait a couple of seconds, and then start the party. Keep this up until you have a visible response to the cue. Sometimes it takes only a few reps, sometimes you'll get into the double digits. Finally, and this is important, protect this delicate fledgling recall. Don't try and use it yet. Build it first. If you actually need your dog to come to you at the park or from the yard, do whatever you've been doing up until now. Don't conflate building with using. We're just starting to build.